Hey friends, how you doing today? It's Patrick here. I haven't done a video for a little while, so I thought I would come on and just do a quick update for you. I'm working my way through Secular Sabotage by Bill Donohue. It's a book about, well, the subtitle, How Liberals Are Destroying Religion and Culture in America. And he talks about how the Catholic Church has been attacked, and he uses the term sabotage by different areas of society. Multicultural sabotage, uh, sabotage by nihilists, sexual sabotage, sabotage from Hollywood interests, sabotage from artistic interests. And I'm almost halfway through, but I wanted to bring to your attention a section in the section that's entitled "Sabotage by Hollywood," because it touches on what I've just been finishing studying about science and religion. The last two major books that I covered, one by Lisa Randall, Knocking on Heaven's Door, and the one by Lawrence Krauss, The Greatest Story Ever Told So Far, were both indicating that science is opposed to religion, or I should clarify that and say that religion is typically opposed to science. And I'd like to say that that is simply not the case. That is the myth that wants to be perpetuated by a lot of current scientific thinkers. And also, it's want to be perpetuated by the image that is portrayed by Hollywood. And on page 110, Bill Donohue talks about Dan Brown and Ron Howard and their portrayal in the movie The Da Vinci Code. And he mentions here that Dan Brown, the author, the writer of these books, who was of course, the author of the spectacular popular book, The Da Vinci Code, he says that Dan Brown is a master of disinformation. In other words, he knows what the historical record says, yet he misrepresents it. Worse, he seems to do it with malice, and his distortion it smears the Catholic Church. His readers are left to believe that the Catholic Church sees science as the enemy, an accusation that is as baseless as it is scurrilous. I don't know how to pronounce that word. Scurrilous? I'm sorry. It's just a bad accusation that Dan Brown makes about. And then Brown begins with a fact page that mentions CERN, the European Organization for Nuclear Research. He distorts the truth so badly about this organization that it was forced to put several pages on its website, setting the record straight. Brown talks about the Brotherhood of the Illuminati, and he says the Illuminati were hunted ruthlessly by the Catholic Church. In the movie, Tom Hanks, who plays the protagonist, Harvard professor Robert Langdon, says that the Catholic Church ordered a brutal massacre to silence them forever. They've come for their revenge. This is all nonsense, Donohue says. Not a single member of the Illuminati was ever hunted, much less killed, by the Catholic Church. Exactly who the Illuminati were shows how bogus Brown's claims are. So I'm just, this is interesting to see a different perspective from Donohue. In the novel, Brown says the Illuminati were founded in the 1500s, but and saying that they persecuted Galileo, but they say it's a fact that the Donohue says the Illuminati were only founded in Bavaria on May the 1st in 1776. He said this isn't a matter of dispute. It was founded by a law professor, Adam Weishaupt, in Bavaria, May 1st, 1776. So all this talk about the Illuminati being formed in the 1600s and that the Vatican, through the Illuminati, vowed vengeance against the Vatican or something like that in the 1600s, that all has to be false, right? And dragging Galileo into this fable is totally irresponsible, Donohue says. Galileo died in 1642, almost a century and a half before the Illuminati were founded, right? So Brown says that the goal of the Illuminati was to create a new world order based on scientific enlightenment, whereas this Illuminati New World Order thesis, founder of the John Birch Society, this puts him in, was a totally different person that came up with this idea. It's spun all kinds of conspiratorial theories, and he goes on to describe them here. I'm not going to go into every single detail for you, but Donohue says that the preposterous idea is Brown's portrayal of the Catholic Church as anti-science. Nothing could be further from the truth. He says, who was responsible for keeping the university afloat in Europe in the Middle Ages? The Catholic Church was the one that supported the universities and kept them open to allow science to be pursued at these schools, right? For the last 50 years, says Professor Thomas Woods, virtually all historians of science have concluded that the scientific revolution was indebted to the church, which is contrary opposed to what people like Dan Brown would have us believe. The Roman Catholic Church gave more financial aid and social support to the study of astronomy for over 6 centuries, from the recovery of ancient learning during the Middle Ages into the Enlightenment, than any other, and probably all other institutions. The scientific achievements of the Jesuits alone reached every corner of the earth. What was it about Catholicism that made it so science-friendly, and why did science take root in Europe and not someplace else? The reason is because Christianity depicted God as a rational, responsive, dependable, and omnipotent being, and the universe as his personal creation. The natural world was thus understood to have a rational, lawful, stable structure, awaiting, indeed even inviting, human comprehension. This is their reasoning that during the Middle Ages and for over 6 centuries, all the way up until the Renaissance, the Catholic Church supported scientific discovery because they felt that God was rational. He created a rational universe, and he expected humans to discover it through science. But Dan Brown doesn't follow any of that. In his mind, the Catholic Church is fearful of science and has always tried to repress it. It would be interesting to know how he would explain the fact that the first leader of the Vatican's Pontifical Academy of Sciences was none other than Galileo Galilei himself, right? Galileo was the leader of the Vatican's Pontifical Academy of Sciences. What got Galileo into trouble was less his ideas than his arrogance. He made claims that he could not scientifically sustain. Copernicus, also a Catholic, never got in trouble for hypothesizing that the earth revolved around the sun, and neither did scientists like Father Roger Boscovich. He continued to explore Copernican ideas at the same time Galileo was sentenced to house arrest. This might have been a mistake by the church, but it needs to be stressed that Galileo was never tortured or imprisoned, as many contend. The difference is that Galileo was initially showered with awards by 2 popes, but he refused to state his theories as mathematical propositions, and even the scientists of his day knew he didn't have the kind of evidence he purported to have. So apparently, the reason why Galileo got into trouble is he said he had this mathematical proof for what he was working on, and he didn't actually have it, and so he ended up getting in trouble for that. But he was working hand in hand with the Catholic Church under their support, and in fact leading their Academy of Sciences. So I just wanted to bring that section to your attention. There's a lot more that's discussed here, but I don't want to go too far into detail. But I did want to bring that to your attention, that it's funny that I'm going through this book, and it actually, a section of it ties into the previous 2 books that I read about science and religion opposing one another, when in fact, as we've already discussed in previous videos, that Christians have contributed tons of scientific discovery down through the ages. And there have been instances where the Catholic Church has perhaps had conflict with individual scientists. But in general, the overall theme and the overall intent of the Catholic Church in particular has been one of supporting science and pushing forward scientific discovery. There's no doubt about that if you look at history objectively. And you know, you look at the discoveries of Newton. He was a devout Christian, and many other scientific discoveries were conducted by devout Christians. So there's a push to create this antithesis between Christianity and science, or religion and science, that is based on the biases of current scientific thinking, or the biases of the current atheist agenda. They want to separate these 2 things and say, oh, Christianity is against science or religion is against science, when that's never been the case. They're trying to create something out of nothing. So I hope that clarifies, and I thought I'd just mention that to you. I'm going to be working on a new project over the coming few days, in the coming few weeks, and I'm going to be discussing a book that was lent to me by a good friend. It's called The Gospel According to Jesus by John MacArthur. What is Authentic Faith? Unfortunately, the title of this book is incorrect. It should be called The Gospel According to John MacArthur. It is a book that I've only just dipped into it, but it's obviously one man's interpretation of the gospel. It is not it is not the gospel according to Jesus by any means. We have to easily remember that the gospel according to Jesus is an individual gospel. He called people individually, and each person that he called, he gave them what was that individual needed to hear. For some people, he said, you follow me. For some people, he said, oh, you don't have to follow me. You go back to your town. To other people, he said, you do this. To other people, he said, you do that to get healed. Some people, he said, just go and sin no more. Right? Some people, he said, give up everything you have. The person, the rich person, he gave certain instruction. This other person, he gave certain instruction. So the beauty of the gospel is that it's an individual call. So the overall theme of the gospel is that, yes, you have to be willing to give up everything at the point of salvation. But from that point on, the instruction is following the Spirit's guiding in an individual's life. Whereas this person obviously doesn't adhere to that. He wants to set the bar higher and higher, and to say that, unless you do this, you're not a real Christian. And this is a very common theme that is easily found in many different preachers of the 21st century, probably starting with Robert Schuller. The theory behind it was, why bother paying any attention to any Christians that may have struggles in their life? They were only interested in the top 1%. You've heard of the 80-20 rule, where they say, well, 20% of the congregation gives 80% of the offering. And so they took it to a further extreme, and they, instead of going for 20%, they went for the top 10% or the top 2% or the top 1% of their congregation. Schuller himself spoke in his book of how often he got his members to contribute $1 million to his ministry, and he was so proud of that. And then this policy was followed by the fellow from California who wrote The Purpose-Driven Life, that sold a gazillion copies. And he did the same thing. He said, well, there's all these Christians that are, he made a circle as a target. And he said, what you really want is that you have these outside Christians that are just, they're like nominal Christians and they're not important. And then you want to get down and down until you find these core Christians that are willing to give up all their resources to the church. And this is how they could exploit their congregation and fleece their sheep. And this fellow is following the exact same process, right? He says that, you want to raise the bar, and the only Christians worth paying attention to are those that are at the core, in that little 1% that are willing to give up everything they have. So it's really a deceptive gospel that they want to share and promote. And I'll give it the benefit of the doubt because I've only read the preface and introduction, but I've already gotten the flavor of what it is. And not only that, it's not hard to see where this guy's head is at when you see the way that he's dressed, right? With the designer watch and the fancy suit and the custom smile. When they make the millions of dollars, they're able to afford surgery and all that kind of things, and plastic surgery and what have you, and the fancy cars that go with it, and the wealth. And so this is where that drives that type of motivation to promote an alternative gospel. And it's funny, in the intro, he says, I know that I might be promoting a different kind of gospel, but I prayed over it, so it's okay. So see, right? He comes out and says, I'm going to be sharing a different gospel with you. And this is called the gospel of lordship, as opposed to the gospel of grace. And he says, oh, the gospel of grace is just cheap grace, And this is the thing. They create the straw man argument. They say, oh, too many Christians are promoting this cheap grace where you just, there's no commitment to it. And there is no church that promotes that. They use that as a starting point. Of course, they want people to surrender and to take that first step. But they create this straw man argument and say, oh, this is what we're against. We don't want this cheap grace. We want total commitment. And unless you're willing to totally give up all your possessions to the church, then you're not a real Christian. So we're promoting this new gospel. It's called the Lordship Gospel. This is what he's promoting in his preface here. He says the Lordship Gospel means you have to give up everything to be a real Christian. Otherwise, you're not following Jesus' instruction. That is an absolute, total, and blatant lie, right? It's a false gospel. So be very careful of these type of people that may come across your path. But I'll be going into it, and I'm going to cover this hopefully over the next few days or a week, depending on how long I get into it. But I see where the book is going by reading the two prefaces already. And so we have to be very, very careful against these type of lies that can infiltrate and destroy people's faiths and shipwreck their faith. Remember that God loves you very much. He cares about you no matter what position that you're in your life, no matter how difficult your life may or may not be, no matter how much resources you may or may not have. God is able to deal with you as an individual. You may have a broken past, but he knows your heart. He knows that you believe in him, and he wants to grow that belief through his Holy Spirit and bring you into a better, happier, more blessed state than you happen to be at any particular time in your life. Tomorrow is always a better day than today when you're putting your trust in God. So keep that in mind. Don't let anybody steal your salvation. Don't let anybody tell you that you're not a Christian. Just keep on believing and trusting in God, and God will take you through. He will be able to make you stand on the final day, regardless of what people like this may try and tell you, right? So keep that in mind. That's where I'm going to be going over the next little while. So thank you so much for watching. God bless you. I pray you have a blessed day, and I'll be in touch again really soon, okay? We'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.